We are very fortunate to have Shirley Simmonds and Dr. Helen Potter with us, and they will be sharing some kōrero about why 2700, the Mana Wāhine kaupapa inquiry to the Tiriti o Waitangi, the treaty, or Te Tiriti o Waitangi tribunal, and acknowledging the Crown's denial of Mana Wāhine, which has serious consequences for our social, economic, cultural and spiritual well-being of Māori women and our access to leadership roles. There's not enough time for any of the kōrero to be given its just space, but we thank you both for agreeing to be part of this hui and elevating the voice of this wahine claim. We mihi to you and we give you your time. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Hinerangi. E ngā haue whā e mihi ana kia koutou. Thank you so much for the opportunity to give a brief overview of our report, Takapau Whāriki, that is part of a wider body of evidence in support of the Mana Wāhine kaupapa inquiry currently before the Waitangi Tribunal here in Aotearoa. I'm not sure if people are familiar with the claim, but the Waitangi Tribunal have commissioned a number of reports. Claimants themselves have commissioned a number of reports. So this one is a new innovation by the Waitangi Tribunal. It's essentially an oral history report, which they haven't done before. So I thought I would start out by just talking a bit about the report, what it's about, how we went about it, and then Shirley will talk more in depth about some of the kōrero that we gathered. So the purpose of the report was to gather important knowledge, mātauranga held by a diversity of Māori women on the concept of Mana Wāhine, and to bring it all together into a report. At the first meeting of our project team, we thought it was only worth doing if we took a disruptive methodological approach, where the goal would be to gather kōrero that was disruptive of colonial heteropatriarchal narratives about wahine Māori, that was disruptive of Western feminist narratives about Mana Wāhine, and that would help to reconstruct our own distinctive Māori understandings of Mana Wāhine. So with that goal as a base, the next step was to develop up a list of people to interview. We were very conscious that we wanted to talk to people who could speak in a disruptive way and in a reconstructive way. We didn't want to hear any replay of colonising narratives. So the first step in this 3-step process to suss out who to talk to, we developed up a list of the key kaupapa, the key issues that we wanted to explore and that were part of the claim itself. So these included gender and cosmogony, sexuality, karanga, which is the first call of women that open formal proceedings, our chin tattoos, moko kauai, karakia, the incantations that connect us with te taiao, with the natural world, our language, whakapapa, the relationships that tie us all together, the environment and Māori economies, whānau, or customary adoption, although that's a terrible translation, menstruation, pregnancy and childbirth, and the socialisation of gender and education. A key part of the project too was about being inclusive of a broad range of wahine. So we also identified key communities of interests within the claimants, and especially those that are often overlooked. So these communities of interest specifically included the creative arts, writers and actors and musicians and so forth, women in gangs, young people, sex workers, the sports and recreation area, those living with disabilities, and also those living with chronic health conditions. And the third step in the process involved developing a list. So we created all these sort of little boxes, and we put a whole lot of names next to things, and then contacted people and see who was available, and we kind of came up with our list and ended up interviewing just under 50 people, 50 wahine. Not all wahine though. In terms of diversity, the participants included Māori who identify as wahine, whakawahine, trans, non-binary, intersex, takatapui and queer, who worked across the spectrum in academia, education, the arts, business, central and local government, health and social services, sex work, non-government organisations and group trusts, including gang-based trusts, and for their whānau marae hapū iwi as kaimahi, advocates, researchers and activists. They ranged in age from teenagers to retirees. Many were parents, some were also grandparents, and a small number were great-grandparents. Some were tangata whaikaha, living with disabilities, or chronic health conditions or neurodiversity, and some were the parents, partners or grandparents of those with disabilities and health conditions. Others were sports people skilled in activities such as kapahaka, maurako and wakaama. Some had been raised in whānau where knowing or learning our language, our laws, our knowledge was the norm, while others had learned more as they had gotten older and sorted out, including those who were adopted or who grew up in state care and reconnected with Te Ao Māori as adults. Participants lived in towns, cities, rural areas across the motu, and often as diaspora away from their ancestral homelands. Some had lived overseas and some were still doing so. So all up, we gathered the kōrero of 65 people, the 48 that we interviewed and the 17 who had been part of the pilot report that started off this whole project. And that meant at the end of the interviewing period, we had literally gathered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of transcript. And because of the sheer breadth and depth of the kōrero from all the different contributors, the knowledge, the strength, and the fight of it, we wanted to simply bind it all together and say to the Waitangi Tribunal, here you go. It was so incredibly amazing, as it was. So in terms of the actual analysis and write-up, we wanted to let the voices speak for themselves, but just do some organising of the kōrero into some key themes. So so this included in the middle of the report are a whole lot of what we've called disruptive discussions. So they range from things like rebuilding alternatives to capitalism and the importance of our relationships with one another as Māori women and Indigenous women, to speaking back to capitalism's constructs like the nuclear family model, which has been so incredibly destructive to our concepts of whānau hapū iwi, and queer phobia, which again has been destructive of whānau relationships, and discussions about decolonising and centering our own practices like karanga and whai kōrero, and the stories of our atua wahine, our goddesses, because those two, you know, many of the stories we have been telling each other have been captured in that sort of whole colonising program. We're so pleased with how it all came together. The participants, the fantastic participants that we spoke with, we're happy with it too, which was really important to us. And we'd also like to acknowledge the rōpū tautoko of leading mana wahine writers and thinkers and doers who worked with us and who were an invaluable source of support. And just one final point before handing over to Shirley. One of the key aims of the report was to draw together a diversity of kōrero from a diversity of wahine, hence the title. But more than just a project aim, it speaks to the key values that are inherent in our Indigenous world: diversity, interconnection, inclusion, inclusivity. from the time before colonisation through today, what was so very clear in all of the kōrero that we heard is the diversity of roles wahine have held across all domains of life, from leadership and strategy, from all the things that we've been told as we've grown up that women can't do, carving and but building waka, building whare, composing, karakia, all these tapu things, and so on, and that there is just no one way or no one script for us. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora e hoa, no reira, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Shirley Simmonds, taku ingoa, he uri o Raukawa, me Ngāpuhi. What I might do just to add to Helen's kōrero is share some of the direct quotes from our report. And as she mentioned, it has an immense depth and breadth. It's really difficult to condense it in any way, but we'll share some of the gems, and there are many. And I'll also look at the same time to hinerangi for any indication of our timings for our kōrero just now. So as Helen mentioned, the report itself is in 3 main sections, the first being Te Mana o Ngā Wāhine, or the mana, prestige and inherent power of women. In this section, there was a lot of story and kōrero shared around whakapapa, or our interconnected relationships. And again, you know, this speaks to the diversity and complexity of our relationships. I have a quote here from one of our participants, Ani Makaire, who says, "Far from striving for uniformity, this material demands a willingness to embrace multiple expressions of the timeless truths underpinning our creation theories. Differences in the way ideas are conveyed add crucial layers of meaning and possibility to the theoretical framework, reflecting the full diversity of human experience." I think this quote in many ways reflects also the richness that's contained in the report itself. There was much kōrero and a lot shared around the importance of our ancestral language, and that it's a source of our solutions as well. A quote here from Mani Reinfeld's, "We have to look deeper into our reo. There are all the clues there of our tupuna ways of knowing, being and doing, and how we operated and connected with each other in terms of gender, and how we connected with our more than human relations in Te Taiao. All those clues are there." As Helen mentioned, there was much kōrero and good representation of those from the breadth of types of gender and the plurality of sexual roles. I feel we gathered quite rich kōrero on this in this kaupapa, on these topics. A quote here from Kim McBreen: "What our stories show is that sometimes gender was important and sometimes it was completely irrelevant, or it was relevant in different ways." And also our report, or the kōrero that we collected, spoke to the power of the whare tangata, or the reproductive power of wahine. And Ngāhuia Murphy is somebody who's worked and very learned in this area. We have a quote here from her. She talks about the karanga, the call, as Helen mentioned, at the beginning of our formal proceedings. "The kai karanga facilitates movement between te ao marama me te ao wairua." That's the earthly world and the spiritual world. "Because the whare tangata is the portal to Hawaii, the passageway between worlds." So this talks about the importance of mana wahine and the interconnectedness between our worlds. One of the sections, just skipped over Tina. Oh no, and the report and the kōrero that we gathered speaks a lot to the connectedness between mana wahine and our land and our environment. So a quote here from Tina Ngata: The mana wahine is that flow of mana that comes from our taiao, from our atua as taiao, through our atua wahine, through our tupuna matua, tupuna wahine, and through to us, that determines how we experience the universe around us and our responses to those experiences as well. The second part of the report talks about our current realities, and in this section, our participants shared many, many stories around their diverse experiences. What I might do, just as I'm conscious of time, just briefly, the final section of our report looked at solutions and ways that we can use our unique, inherent Indigenous genius to map our way forwards. And I'll just share a final quote here from one of our rangatahi, or our younger participants in the project itself, that talks a little bit to that and her desires for what she'd like to see come from the claim itself. So what I would like to see come out of this claim is a wider understanding and acknowledgement of how wahine have been uniquely impacted by colonisation, by the patriarchy of the colonisers, whakaaro, and perhaps an acknowledgement of that in a service. And then a commitment to support the revitalisation of practices to re-indigenise the whakaaro of wahine Māori. That's a quote from one of our rangatahi, Tyra Begbie. And I might close just there now, as I said, conscious of time, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share just some of the amazing kōrero that we gathered from amazing participants as well. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu, kia koe hene rangi o tira kia koutou katoa e hono mai ana. Te rara tātou.
Tēnā kōrua ngā pau o te kirimi, mo te hunga wahine, te mana wahine, ka rongo mai ana i ngā kōrero i pupu ake mai i tēnā wahine. We just acknowledge you as pillars of this process, this claim for mana wahine and all contributors who've contributed, if not in providing their whakaaro or also being those writers. Tēnei te mihi kia kōrua. And I see that there is a tono for a copy of the report from some of the wahine online. So we ask if you could just give us that link. That would be amazing. Tēnā no kōrua.